From product pitch to business impact. Let me start with something that might sting a little bit, but I think you need to hear it. Nobody cares about your product. I know. You've spent months, maybe years, building it, refining it, learning every feature, every specification, every competitive advantage. You can talk about it for hours. You know the roadmap, you know the architecture, you know why version 3.2 is better than version 3.1. And that's wonderful. That knowledge matters. But here's the thing. Your customer does not care about any of that. Not really. Not in the way you think they do. And if you're still walking into meetings leading with features, leading with specifications, leading with a product demo before you've even understood what keeps your prospect up at night, then you're leaving money on the table. Worse than that, you're leaving relationships on the table. You're leaving trust on the table. You're leaving your entire career growth on the table. Because the gap between a mediocre salesperson and a great one, the gap between someone who struggles to hit quota and someone who builds a career that compounds over decades, that gap lives right here, in this shift. The shift from product pitch to business impact. And today, I want to walk you through what that shift actually looks like. Not in theory, not in some abstract framework you'll forget by tomorrow, but in the real, messy, human reality of sitting across from someone who has a problem and deciding whether you're going to talk about your thing or their thing. Let's get into it. So here's what typically happens. You're a salesperson, maybe you're new, maybe you've been doing this for a while, but something isn't clicking. You get a meeting with a prospect. You're excited. You've prepared your slides. You've rehearsed your pitch. You walk in, you do some small talk. Maybe you compliment the office or ask about their weekend, and then you launch into it. Let me tell you about what we do. And for the next 20 or 30 minutes, you talk. You show screens. You demonstrate workflows. You compare yourself to competitors. You drop statistics. You share case studies. And the person across from you nods politely, maybe asks a question or two, and at the end says, "This looks interesting. Let me think about it. Can you send me some materials?" And you walk out thinking that went pretty well. They seemed interested. They asked for materials. That's a good sign, right? No, that's not a good sign. That's the sound of a door closing politely. That's someone who didn't want to be rude but also didn't feel any urgency, any connection, any reason to move forward. You gave them information. You didn't give them insight. You gave them features. You didn't give them a future. You talked about your product. You didn't talk about their business. And this is the fundamental mistake that most salespeople make, not because they're bad people, not because they're lazy, but because they were never taught the difference. Or if they were taught it as a concept and never really internalized it as a practice. So let me make the distinction as clear as I possibly can. A product pitch says, "Here's what our solution does." A business impact conversation says, "Here's what changes in your world when this problem gets solved." A product pitch focuses on inputs, features, capabilities, integrations, technical specifications. A business impact conversation focuses on outputs, revenue growth, cost reduction, risk mitigation, time saved, competitive advantage gained, problems eliminated. A product pitch positions you as a vendor, someone selling something. A business impact conversation positions you as an advisor, someone who understands the client's world deeply enough to prescribe the right course of action. And here's why this matters so much. When you're a vendor, you're replaceable. There's always someone cheaper, someone with a shinier feature, someone who got to the client before you did. But when you're an advisor, when you've demonstrated that you understand the client's business, their challenges, their goals, their fears, you become irreplaceable. Because they're not buying a product anymore. They're buying your judgment. They're buying your understanding. They're buying the confidence that you will help them make the right decision. And that is a completely different sale. Now I want to be honest with you about something. This shift is hard. It's harder than it sounds. Because talking about your product is comfortable. You know your product. You've been trained on your product. You have slides about your product. You have a demo environment for your product. All of that is within your control. It's safe. But talking about the client's business, that requires preparation. That requires research. That requires asking questions you might not know the answers to. That requires sitting in silence while the client thinks. That requires admitting that you don't have all the information yet and that you need to learn before you can prescribe. That requires vulnerability. And vulnerability in a profession that's already full of rejection and pressure feels dangerous. But it's not dangerous. It's the opposite. It's the safest place you can be. Because when you lead with curiosity instead of certainty, when you ask before you tell, when you listen before you pitch, you build something that no feature comparison or pricing discount can ever build. You build trust. And trust is the only sustainable competitive advantage in sales. Let me give you a concrete example of what this looks like in practice. Imagine you sell a project management software. Good product, nice interface, great integrations, solid reporting. You could walk into a meeting and spend 30 minutes showing the dashboard, demonstrating how tasks get assigned, how timelines get tracked, how reports get generated. And the client would nod and say, "Looks nice. We'll think about it." Or you could walk in and say something like this: "Before I show you anything, I'd love to understand what's happening in your world right now. You mentioned when we spoke on the phone that you've got about 40 projects running simultaneously across 3 regions. What does your visibility into those projects look like today? When something falls behind schedule, how quickly do you find out? And when you do find out, what does it cost you?" Now you're in a completely different conversation. Now the client is talking about their reality, their pain, their frustration. And as they talk, you're learning things that no amount of pre-call research could have told you. You're learning that they lost a major client last quarter because a deliverable was late and nobody knew until it was too late. You're learning that their regional managers are using 3 different spreadsheets and nobody has a single source of truth. You're learning that the CEO has been asking for a consolidated view of project health for 6 months, and nobody can provide it. Now, when you eventually show your product, you're not showing features. You're showing the solution to the problems they just told you about. You're saying, "Remember how you said you lost that client because nobody knew the project was behind? Here's how that never happens again." You're saying, You mentioned the CEO wants a consolidated view. Here's what that looks like live, updated in real time, accessible from their phone. Do you see the difference? In the first scenario, you're showing a tool. In the second scenario, you're showing a future where they don't lose clients, a future where the CEO gets what they've been asking for, a future where the chaos turns into clarity. And that future, that outcome, that impact, that is what people pay for. Not features, not specifications, not integrations, results, efficiency, growth, risk control, peace of mind. This is true whether you're selling software, financial services, consulting, manufacturing equipment, or anything else. The principle is universal. Customers buy outcomes, not inputs. They buy the after picture, not the ingredients. Now, let me take this a level deeper, because I think there's a nuance here that a lot of people miss. When I say business impact, I don't just mean financial impact, although that's often the most tangible and measurable form. Business impact includes several dimensions, and the best salespeople learn to speak to all of them. The first dimension is revenue impact. Can your solution help the client make more money? Can it help them win more deals, enter new markets, increase customer lifetime value, reduce churn? If the answer is yes, you need to be able to articulate that in concrete terms. Not our solution increases revenue. That means nothing. But based on what you've told me about your average deal size and your current conversion rate, if we can improve your pipeline visibility by even 20%, that's roughly $300,000 in additional revenue over 12 months. That is a conversation that gets CFOs to lean forward. The second dimension is cost reduction. Can your solution help the client spend less money? Can it eliminate redundant processes, reduce headcount needs, lower error rates, decrease waste? Again, specificity is everything. "We save you money" is meaningless. Based on the 12 hours per week your team currently spends on manual data entry, which at your average loaded cost per employee works out to about $47,000 annually, our automation would recover most of that time within the first 90 days. Now you're speaking a language that decision makers understand. The third dimension is risk mitigation. This one is often underestimated, but it's incredibly powerful, especially when you're selling to senior leaders. Can your solution reduce the client's exposure to regulatory risk, operational risk, reputational risk, cybersecurity risk, compliance risk? Risk is emotional. People fear loss more than they desire gain. If you can show a client that they're currently exposed to a risk they hadn't fully appreciated, and that your solution addresses that exposure, you've created urgency that no discount or feature comparison can create. The fourth dimension is efficiency. Can your solution help the client do more with less? Can it accelerate processes, improve throughput, reduce cycle times, eliminate bottlenecks? Efficiency gains are compelling because they compound over time. If you save someone 2 hours a day, that's 10 hours a week, 40 hours a month, 480 hours a year. That's 12 full work weeks. What could they accomplish with 12 extra weeks? And the fifth dimension, which I think is the most overlooked of all, is strategic advantage. Can your solution help the client do something their competitors cannot? Can it give them a capability that positions them ahead of the market? Can it enable a strategy that wouldn't be possible without it? This is where you move from being a cost center in the client's mind to being a strategic investment. And that completely changes the dynamics of the negotiation, the pricing conversation, and the long-term relationship. So when I say business impact, I mean all of these things: revenue, cost, risk, efficiency, strategy. The best salespeople learn to identify which of these dimensions matters most to each specific client and lead with that. Because here's another trap. Not every client cares about the same thing. If you walk into a meeting with a growth stage startup, they probably don't care much about cost reduction. They care about revenue growth and speed. If you walk into a meeting with a heavily regulated financial institution, they probably care a lot about risk and compliance. If you walk into a meeting with a manufacturing company facing margin pressure, they care about efficiency and cost. You need to diagnose before you prescribe. And that diagnosis starts with questions, not presentations. This brings me to something I think about a lot, which is the nature of expertise in sales. Most people think expertise in sales means knowing your product really well. And yes, product knowledge is important. You need to understand what you're selling. You need to be able to answer technical questions. You need to know your competitive landscape. That's table stakes. That's the minimum. But real expertise, the kind that clients pay premium prices for, the kind that earns you trust and referrals and long-term relationships, that expertise is about understanding the client's world. It's about knowing their industry trends, their competitive pressures, their regulatory environment, their organizational dynamics, their growth trajectory, their pain points, their aspirations. When you know those things, you can connect dots that the client hasn't connected yet. You can say, "I've seen 3 other companies in your space face this exact challenge, and here's what worked for them." You can say, "Based on the regulatory changes coming next year, you might want to think about this now rather than waiting." You can say, "The trend I'm seeing in your industry is that companies are shifting from this approach to that approach, and the ones who move first are gaining significant advantage." That kind of insight is incredibly valuable. It positions you not as someone who's trying to sell something, but as someone who's trying to help. And when clients feel that you're genuinely trying to help them succeed, everything changes. The resistance drops, the trust builds, the conversation deepens, the deal moves forward. And when it's time to discuss pricing, they're not comparing you to the cheapest alternative. They're evaluating the value of your partnership. And this is where I want to challenge a belief that I think holds a lot of salespeople back. Many salespeople, especially early in their careers, believe that their job is to convince people to buy things, that the essence of sales is persuasion, overcoming objections, handling resistance, closing hard, getting the signature. And look, there are elements of truth in that. Sales does require the ability to handle objections. It does require confidence and persistence. It does require the ability to ask for the business. I'm not dismissing those skills. But if persuasion is your primary strategy, You're fighting an uphill battle every single day because nobody likes to be persuaded. Nobody likes to feel like they're being sold to. Nobody likes to feel like someone is trying to get them to do something. The moment a client feels pressure, their defenses go up. And once those defenses are up, no amount of clever language or closing technique is going to bring them down. The alternative is so much more effective and so much more sustainable. Instead of trying to convince people to buy, help them convince themselves. Instead of overcoming objections, prevent them from arising in the first place by doing such thorough discovery that your recommendation feels obvious. Instead of closing hard, make the next step feel natural and inevitable. And the way you do all of this is by shifting from product pitch to business impact. When you deeply understand the client's situation, when you've quantified the cost of their problem, when you've painted a vivid picture of what their world looks like after the problem is solved, the client sells themselves. They don't need to be convinced. They need to be guided. There's a beautiful metaphor that I think captures this perfectly. Think about the difference between a flashlight and a mirror. A flashlight shines light outward. It says, "Look at me. Look at my product. Look at my features. Look at how great we are." A mirror reflects light back. It says, "Let me show you your situation. Let me help you see what you might be missing. Let me help you understand what's possible." The best salespeople are mirrors, not flashlights. They help clients see themselves more clearly. And in that clarity, the decision to move forward becomes obvious. Now, I want to talk about something practical, because I know that shifting from product pitch to business impact sounds great in theory, but the question is always, how do I actually do this in my next meeting? Here's my answer, and it's deceptively simple. Ask better questions. And then, and this is the part most people skip, actually listen to the answers. Most salespeople ask surface-level questions. What are your biggest challenges? What are you looking for in a solution? What's your budget? These aren't bad questions, but they're generic. They get generic answers, and generic answers lead to generic pitches. Better questions go deeper. They're specific. They're contextual. They demonstrate that you've done your homework, and they invite the client to think in ways they haven't thought before. Instead of, "What are your biggest challenges?" Try, "I noticed your company expanded into 2 new markets last year. How has that affected your ability to maintain consistent quality across all regions?" Instead of, "What are you looking for in a solution?" Try, "If you could wave a magic wand and fix one thing about how your team operates today, what would it be and why?" Instead of, "What's your budget?" Try, "When you think about the cost of not solving this problem for another 12 months, what does that look like?" Do you see how these questions are different? They're not interrogating. They're exploring. They're inviting the client into a deeper conversation. They're demonstrating that you understand their world. And they're creating the conditions for the client to articulate their own pain, their own urgency, their own motivation to change. And when the client articulates those things themselves, they believe them, because they said them, not you. When you tell a client they have a problem, they can argue with you. When they tell you they have a problem, they've already accepted it. That's the power of great questions. But here's the thing about questions. You have to be genuinely curious. You can't fake it. If you're asking questions just to get through your discovery checklist so you can launch into your pitch, clients will feel that. They'll sense that you're not really listening, that you're just waiting for your turn to talk. And the whole thing falls apart. Genuine curiosity means you actually want to understand. You're fascinated by how their business works. You're intrigued by their challenges. You're thinking about their situation from multiple angles. You're following up on things they say that surprise you. You're asking, tell me more about that. You're asking, what does that mean for your team on a daily basis? You're asking, how long has that been going on? And when you listen, truly listen, something magical happens. The client feels heard. And feeling heard is one of the most powerful experiences a human being can have. In a world where everyone is broadcasting and nobody is receiving, the person who listens with genuine attention becomes unforgettable. I want to share something personal here because I think it illustrates this point in a way that theory cannot. I'm a salesperson myself. I sell my skills, my ideas, my software, my perspective. Every day I'm selling. And I've made every mistake I'm describing. I've walked into meetings and talked for 30 minutes about features that the client didn't care about. I've sent proposals that listed capabilities instead of outcomes. I've lost deals because I was so focused on what I wanted to say that I forgot to listen to what the client was trying to tell me. And the turning point for me wasn't learning a new technique or a new framework. It was a mindset shift. I stopped thinking of sales as something I do to people and started thinking of it as something I do for people. I stopped trying to be impressive and started trying to be useful. I stopped leading with my agenda and started leading with curiosity about their agenda. And the results were immediate and dramatic. Not because I suddenly became more charismatic or more articulate, but because clients could feel the difference. They could feel that I was genuinely interested in their success, not just in making a sale. And that feeling, that sense of being truly understood and genuinely cared about, that's what opens wallets. That's what builds partnerships. That's what turns one-time buyers into lifelong clients who refer you to everyone they know. Let me talk about another dimension of this that I think is really important, especially if you're selling B2B or selling high-value solutions. When you shift from product pitch to business impact, you naturally start having conversations with higher-level decision makers. And this is crucial because one of the biggest frustrations in sales is spending weeks or months talking to someone who ultimately doesn't have the authority to say yes. Here's why the shift changes the conversation level. When you talk about features and specifications, you're having a technical conversation. And technical conversations happen with technical people. Implementers, users, middle managers. These people can say no, but they often can't say yes. They can evaluate your product, but they can't approve the budget. But when you talk about business impact, when you talk about revenue growth, cost reduction, risk mitigation, strategic advantage, you're having a business conversation. And business conversations happen with business leaders, VPs, directors, C-suite executives. These are the people who control budgets, who make strategic decisions, who can say yes. So if you're frustrated that you keep getting stuck at the middle management level, that you keep hearing, "I need to check with my boss," the problem might not be your product or your pricing. The problem might be your conversation. You might be having the wrong conversation with the wrong person. And the fix is to elevate your conversation from product to impact, from features to outcomes, from technical to strategic. This doesn't mean you ignore the technical buyers. They matter. They're often the ones who will use your solution every day, and their buy-in is essential. But it means you need to be bilingual. You need to be able to speak the language of features and specifications when you're talking to implementers, and the language of business impact when you're talking to executives. The best salespeople move fluidly between these two languages, depending on who they're talking to. Now I want to address something that I know some of you are thinking. "Jay, this all sounds great, but my product doesn't have a huge business impact. It's a small tool. It's a commodity. How do I talk about business impact when my product is just a widget?" And my answer is this: every product has a business impact, every single one. If it didn't, nobody would buy it. The question is whether you've taken the time to understand and articulate what that impact is. Let me give you a simple example. Let's say you sell office supplies, pens, paper, printer cartridges, about as commodity as it gets, right? Where's the business impact in printer cartridges? Well, think about it. If a company runs out of printer cartridges at a critical moment, maybe they can't print a contract that needs to be signed today. Maybe a presentation doesn't get printed for an important board meeting. Maybe invoices don't go out on time and cash flow gets delayed. The impact of not having office supplies is operational friction, wasted time, missed deadlines, frustrated employees. So even if you're selling printer cartridges, you can talk about reliability, consistency, never running out, automated reordering, reducing the administrative burden on the office manager, freeing up time for higher value work. You can talk about the cost of operational interruptions. You can talk about the peace of mind of knowing that the basics are always handled. Is it the same as selling enterprise software that transforms how a company operates? No. But the principle is the same. You're not selling a cartridge. You're selling the assurance that the business runs smoothly without anyone having to think about it. That's an outcome. That's an impact. So don't hide behind the "my product is a commodity" excuse. Dig deeper. Find the impact. It's always there. Let me shift gears and talk about something that I think connects all of this together, which is the idea that in today's world, everyone is a salesperson. I don't just mean people with sales in their job title. I mean everyone. If you're a freelancer, you're selling your services. If you're a job seeker, you're selling your skills. If you're an entrepreneur, you're selling your vision. If you're a manager, you're selling your ideas to your team. If you're a professional of any kind, you're selling your expertise. And the principle we've been discussing today applies to all of these situations. When you're in a job interview, don't pitch your resume. Talk about the impact you've had. Don't list your skills. Describe the outcomes those skills have created. Don't talk about what you know. Talk about what you've done with what you know and what you can do for them. When you're trying to win a freelance client, don't send them a list of services you offer. Ask them about their goals, understand their challenges, and show them what their world looks like after working with you. When you're pitching an investor, don't walk them through your product features. Show them the market opportunity, the problem you're solving, the revenue trajectory, the competitive moat. In every one of these situations, the shift is the same. From inputs to outputs. From what you do to what changes because of what you do. From your product to their world. This is especially important in the age we live in, where AI is transforming every industry, where traditional jobs are being disrupted, where the ability to sell yourself, your ideas, your unique value, is becoming the most essential skill anyone can have. You can be the most talented person in the room, but if you can't communicate your value in terms of impact, the world will never know. And this is why I'm so passionate about sales as a discipline and as a practice. Not because I love closing deals, although there's certainly a thrill in that, but because I believe that learning to sell, truly sell, in the way we've been discussing today, is learning to connect with other human beings at the deepest level. It's learning to understand what people really need, not what they say they need, but what they truly need. It's learning to articulate value in a way that resonates. It's learning to build trust. It's learning to be genuinely useful. And those skills don't just make you a better salesperson. They make you a better human being. I want to leave you with one more thought before we wrap up. There's a temptation when you start thinking about business impact to focus only on the rational side. The numbers, the ROI calculations, the cost-benefit analysis. And yes, those things are important. Decision makers need to justify their decisions with data. They need to show their bosses that the investment makes financial sense. But don't forget the emotional side. Because ultimately, every decision is emotional. Even the most rational, data-driven executive is a human being with fears, aspirations, ego, pride, insecurity, ambition. They're worried about making the wrong decision. They're hoping to look good in front of the board. They're anxious about the future of their industry. They're proud of what they've built and protective of it. The best business impact conversations weave together both the rational and the emotional. They say, here are the numbers, and they also say, here's what this means for you personally. Here's how this affects the team you've built. Here's how this protects the legacy you're creating. When you can do both, when you can speak to the head and the heart simultaneously, you become unstoppable. Not because you're manipulative, but because you're complete. You're addressing the whole person, not just the job title. So here's my challenge to you. The next time you have a sales conversation, whether it's a formal meeting, a casual networking event, a job interview, or a pitch to a potential partner, catch yourself the moment you start talking about what your product or service does. Stop, take a breath, and redirect the conversation to what it means for them. Ask yourself, what changes in their world because of what I'm offering? And lead with that. It won't be perfect the first time. You'll stumble. You'll fall back into old habits. You'll find yourself 3 slides into a product demo before you realize you never asked a single question about their business. That's okay. This is a practice, not a performance. You get better every time. And over time, as this shift becomes natural, As it becomes your default way of engaging with clients and prospects and partners and colleagues, you'll notice something remarkable. You'll stop feeling like you're selling. You'll start feeling like you're helping, and the line between the two will disappear entirely. Because the deep truth at the heart of everything we've discussed today is that the best salespeople don't sell products. They solve problems. They don't pitch features. They paint futures. They don't close deals. They open relationships. And that is the shift from product pitch to business impact. Thank you for spending this time with me today. I'm Jay, and I'm on this journey of growth right alongside you, every single day, learning, stumbling, getting better, sharing what I find along the way. If this resonated with you, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Drop a comment, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and I'll see you in the next one.